Hello, it is I, the degenerate on the internet, here to bring you yet another video wherein I'm going to describe the various systems and background behind Path of Exile for a close friend of mine, and also potentially for you, whoever you may be listening to this video. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how the system of gems, sockets, and links works in Path of Exile. So let's jump right into it. So, unlike other video games, or specifically isometric RPGs like Diablo or Torchlight, every skill your character uses is only gained from gems. So you basically don't have any passive abilities whatsoever. So the way that the gems work is you need to have an open slot on an item, or otherwise known as a socket. Once the gem is in the socket, you need to have obviously the appropriate levels or stats required to use that particular gem. Then if the gem in question is an active ability, then you can activate it once it's slotted into your item. So that's the basic gist of it. So you pick your gems, your skills, whatever you want to use, you put them into items, and then you can use them once they're attached to an equipment that you have equipped on you. So every item has a different number of sockets that it can have. Boots, helmets, and gloves can have a maximum of 4 sockets. Two-handed weapons like bows can have a maximum of 6. Any two-handed weapon can have a maximum of 6 sockets. Shields and other one-handed weapons like axes and swords and such can have a maximum of 3. Quivers are unique because they can be equipped with what is normally a two-handed weapon, a bow, so they can't have any sockets at all. And lastly, body armor can have a maximum of 6. This belt is a unique belt. It has an open socket, but not for gems. This is an abyssal socket. If you see items that have sort of this blackish and green aesthetic to them, these are from the Abyss League. And almost all Abyss-related items have Abyss sockets. The best Abyss items typically are either the belts, because you can have the best possible rolls on the belt like any normal belt would have, but it also has an open socket. Which means that it can have all the benefits of a normal belt plus whatever stats you can get onto the abyssal gem as well. But there's several gauntlets and boots that have abyssal sockets as well, and they can have a maximum of 2 abyssal sockets, which means you get not 1 but 2 of these jewels, which can have really good rolls. It's essentially like getting an additional jewel socket for your items that you have equipped on your character instead of just on your passive tree. So that ends up being very powerful if you have a very expensive abyssal jewel that you can socket into those. But anyway, so the other thing that's interesting about Path of Exile is that gems rather, have to be connected to other gems to have them be affected by each other. So that's the reason why 6-socket body armors or weapons are the strongest items in the game typically, because the more support gems you can link to your attack skill or to auras or to supporting any other kind of ability, the more supports they get, either the more damage they do or the more additional mechanics you can stack on them. So the way the game works is when you have an item, so I'll just craft an item so I can sort of display this in action. So let's go with this. So this is a glove, so it can have a maximum of 4 sockets. So I'm going to scour it because I don't want the rolls it had on before. This is the maximum roll that its implicit mod at the top there can have. Then I'm going to increase its quality. Increasing quality on items increases their defensive stats, and also very, very minorly increases the percentage chance of it having maximum rolls for sockets and links. So you can see I just got it in one go. That's pretty lucky. The more sockets and the more links you need to make on the item, the less percentage chance there is of getting it. I don't know what the cost is on the bench. You can force sockets and links for basically an increased price. In almost all cases, the variance on getting the appropriate rolls of these things is less than the cost that it has associated with it. So for example, the 2 linked sockets, you'll always get links if you click on it, I'm pretty sure, so this is worthless. The 4 sockets 1 for 10 is actually not bad. I think that in general, I am pretty lucky in when I'm rolling sockets for 4-socket items, so this does not end up being very useful. The most important one, however, is the 6-socket link. Costs 1,500 of the orb of fusings of it. So most people that you look up online mention that it's the typical average to 6-link an item is around 800 to 900 orbs of fusing. Obviously, that's entirely dependent on RNG. Some people are way luckier than that, and some people are way less lucky than that. I know of some people that have taken as many as 4,000 fusings to 6-link an item. So anyway, as I was saying before, 6-linking an item is very important. This is a particularly unique thing. So some items, actually, it's beneficial to not have them be 6-linked, or alternatively, they have other benefits besides having a 6-link. So in this case, the Shroud of the Lightless is an abyssal item. So instead of having a 6th socket for gems, it has an abyssal socket instead. The benefit to this is that socketed gems into the chest get a level 20 elemental penetration that comes from the chest. So that means that even though this is a 5-link, it's a pseudo 6-link because the 6th link comes from the item itself. There are several items that have additional supports that are linked to any gems that are socketed into the item. This is one of them. So basically, I get the benefit of having a 6-link. It only costs as much as a 5-link normally costs, or alternatively, I can just buy one of these, like the base item, and then I can socket and 5-link it myself. And 5-linking an item takes way less fusings than a 6-link does. I typically find I can get a 5-link within like 90 to 100 fusings. So this is a very economical choice of armor that I'm using. And I already would be socketing in the elemental penetration gem specifically for fire on this character anyway. So having elemental penetration for this for free ends up being very good. This character also has an additional item that I'm doing sort of a pseudo link on. So Frost Furno is a unique helmet. This is an upgraded unique. Some items have a base that you then use a prophecy on, and then it upgrades the item. This is one such item. So when it gets upgraded, it gets socketed gems are supported by level 30 cold to fire. By default, you can only level a gem up to level 20. 20 being the max. You can increase that number with a couple of methods. If you val items, you corrupt them, and that gives them unpredictable results. One of the results that you can get on the gem is that it levels it up above the 20 cap to 21. There are also, additionally, this item you can see gives +2 to socketed fire and cold gems. So items that have plus to level of socketed gems can increase there beyond the level 20 cap. There is also a unique support called Empower support. It's part of a trifecta of unique support gems. It's Empower, Enlighten, and Enhance is the green one. Enhance increases the quality of the gems it's socketed to. Enlighten decreases the mana reservation that the gems have that are connected to it, and Empower increases the level of gems that are connected to it. They have no effect until they hit at least level 2. They can get to a maximum typically of they can get to level 3, so these are unique in that they can only hit level 3 by default, and again, if you val them, you can get them to level 4, and then if I connect an Empower to an Enlighten, then I can get Enlighten theoretically to a level 5, and some other shenanigans. Anyway, the point is that on Frost Furno, because it has socketed gems are supported by level 30 cold to fire, that ends up being a much higher link efficacy than it would imply. Cold to fire, I think by default at level 20 gives like 39% fire damage or something. Let me see. So by level, the percentage increase at level 20 is 29%. Getting it to level 30 increases that by 10 to 39%. In addition, because I'm using Elemental Hit, which is a fire and a cold and a lightning gem, so it ends up getting an additional 4 levels from being socketed into the helmet. So because it gets 4 levels and it has socketed gems that are supported by level 30 cold to fire, this ends up being essentially a free pseudo 6-link because of how much damage that increase gets. Increasing the level of spell and attack gems ends up being significantly better than a lot of other supports because the base damage of the gem increases substantially from being leveled up. So this ends up being a pseudo 6-link. So there are a lot of unique weapons you can, items, so helmets, gauntlets, gloves, whatever, that have additional modifiers to things socketed into them. So if you find them or make your build around them, this can often be a much more economical solution than buying a 6-link flat. In my opinion, your best option for getting 6 links is not to try and link your own unless you get a max roll, like top tier GG endgame item that is way better than anything else you're going to find in the marketplace. That I would like spend the currency to 6-link myself. But in the most cases, it's a lot cheaper just to buy the 6-link off the marketplace. I would say most 6-links tend to go around for, say, 2 Exalt and maybe a little bit less depending on how good the rolls on it are. There are other exceptions as well. This is a unique chest piece called the Tabula Rasa. It's probably the most commonly used leveling unique item in the game because, as you can see, it has 6 links and it has 6 white sockets. So I didn't mention this yet because it's kind of self-explanatory, but different sockets have colors. Green gems obviously go in the green socket, red gems go in the red socket, blue sockets go in the blue sockets allow blue gems to go in them. White sockets can allow any color gem to go in them. So Tabula Rasa is a really good leveling item because A, it has 6 links, so you can put a 6 link immediately as soon as you start playing the game. It has no level requirement or stat requirement, so anyone can use it. And because it has white sockets, I can swap in and out gems as I level completely freely without worrying about needing to recolor the item. So this is like a top tier leveling unique. At the start of leagues, it ends up being pretty expensive, but by the time you hit a couple weeks into a league, these end up being pretty cheap. They're usually like maybe 10 chaos or something, which ends up being relatively cheap if you're just leveling up a new character. Anyway, so first rule of thumb when you are leveling up is that you should not spend too much currency socketing or like increasing the sockets and linking items. You want to save those for until you get around to the mid game when you actually have like enough gems that you need to be linked to be effective for that to be useful. But in the early game, like especially if you're like a Tabula Rasa, that pretty much covers your attacking skill, so you can just put whatever the fuck else you want to use in the meantime. So yeah, so general rule of thumb, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, you can only affect socketed gems by having them linked to other things. Some weapons and chest pieces give you by default a skill that is cast by the weapon. So for example, there is a unique two-handed axe called Namahu's Flame, or Nagamahu's Flame, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. But the weapon is on hit, it has a chance to spew a bunch of magma balls off the weapon. So in that case, because the unique skill is on the weapon, the sockets on the item don't need to be linked to affect the unique skill it has. So it just needs to be a 6-socket weapon, and then all the gems in the weapon will affect the balls that it throws off. So that's a unique perspective there. There are also some unique chests that have an additional skill on it that make a pseudo 7-link. Actually, I think I have the character here that has that particular chest piece, so I'll just swap over really quick so I can demonstrate this. So the chest piece is called Soul Mantle. This is probably the best totem-based chest in the game because it gives socketed gems that are supported by a level 20 spell totem. Spell totem is a red gem, and basically when you socket a spell into any item that has the spell totem next to it, it makes it so that you can't cast the spell anymore, but instead your spell totem will cast it for you instead. So basically by having level... so yeah, it throws out these totems, and then when there's enemies around, the totems throw the spell out by themselves. They're kind of like a semi-minion thing, but they're somewhat different. So by having the item have the totem spell already on it, this becomes a pseudo 7-link. If I had it 6-link, obviously it's just a 5-link at the moment, but if I had it 6-link, that would be 7 links. So pseudo 7-links like this are probably the strongest things in the game. This actually ends up probably being better than a 7-link. This is probably like actually closer to a pseudo 8-link because it says +1 to maximum number of summoned totems. By default, you can only have the 1. There is a notable on the passive tree called Ancestral Bond that gives you an additional +1. This gives me +1, so that makes 3. And the Hierophant also has a unique notable on their Ascendancy that gives them +1, which makes me a max of 4 now. So by giving me an additional totem, this increases my damage by I think it's something like 50%. 50% is about the maximum you would expect to get off of an additional linked gem. So because this gives me a free link by the level 20 spell totem and gives me an additional totem, this ends up being like a pseudo 8 link if it's 6 link, which is insane. The downside is that every time my totems die, I get a random curse assigned to me. There are two ways you get around this. You can either have a flask that gives you curse immunity, so that when they expire, you can't be cursed because you're immune to curses. There's a unique ring called Kikuzaru, which gives you reduced effectiveness of curses on you by 40%. So you equip 2 of them on you, and then the curses don't affect you enough to be like reasonably, so that doesn't matter. The last is a super expensive alternative, which gives you curse immunity. It's a unique shield that has to be upgraded with a prophecy, and the prophecy is super rare. So I think currently they're on the marketplace for like 50 exalts or something absurd. So that's not viable to get. But yeah, so when you're making your build, or if you're trying to figure out what will affect the gem you're using, basically just look, if you like hover over the gem, it says at the top there, first it has the name of the skill, and then it has a listing of all of the modifiers that are related to that gem. So it says Glacial Cascade is a spell, it is an area of effect, and it is cold based. So any gems, like support gems, that say they support that particular thing will support this. So for example, Faster Casting Support says it's a support and it has spell. This has spell on it, therefore this affects it. Increased Critical Strike Support just says support, so that means it affects anything that does damage basically, or can have a modifiable crit strike chance. So this has crit, this can have crit strike applied, therefore this works. Controlled Destruction says it's spelled support, it's a spell, therefore it works. Physical Lightning, again, says it's lightning and support. This is an odd outlier, basically. It just says support, so it affects this, because this deals physical damage. This affects it because it converts physical to lightning, so therefore it affects that. So just generally speaking, you can look at the gems, and it will tell you. In addition, if I go to a gem vendor, so say, for example, I'm in the end act, and I go over to the gem vendor right here, I'm pretty sure... There's a way to look at the gems so that it displays a drop-down menu of what... there it is. Yeah, go. Yeah. So I'm sorry. It only works for support gems. So if you hover over the support gems in the shop, it actually will tell you which things you have equipped on your character right now that gem affects. So you can see it's got check marks on everything that it affects in my inventory, that it's socketed onto my items. So that's another way that you can just sort of get a quick check up on what supports affect your gems. Typically, if you're just starting out, I would recommend looking up a build, and the build guide will just give you a breakdown of what are the best possible gem links to be using on your spells and your skills, and you should just follow the guide while paying attention to what supports they're linking to things. In most cases, the most efficient support links end up being the same for almost all combinations of gems of that type. So for example, Glacial Cascade has faster casting because I want to cast faster. It's got crit strike because I'm scaling crit. If you're scaling crit, this ends up being pretty effective in most cases. If I have capped or close to capped crit chance already before equipping this, then I would get the equivalent of this instead that gives increased crit strike multiplier, because that will be more effective damage. Controlled Destruction reduces your crit strike chance but increases your spell damage substantially. So 100% reduced critical strike sounds really bad, but it's actually not that, it's pretty minimal. And because I have increased crit strike, which increases this by 84, that's almost entirely canceled out right there, and it gives plus 41% spell damage. So that ends up being pretty effective overall. Physical Lightning is just here because I don't have a better link to put on it right now, and since it's a physically based spell, this gives a bunch of bonus lightning damage and it converts some of it to lightning. So because I'm scaling elemental damage on this character anyway, that ends up being a lot more effective overall. So yeah, most of the time, the links you're going to take on the gem are fairly self-explanatory once you just sort of go over the support gems and just start reading them. And you basically just want to pick, especially obviously for your attacking skill, you just pick whatever's going to give it the highest damage multiplier. If you go to, say, your Path of Building, and if you go to your skill, and you just start throwing stuff into it, you can actually just see the effective DPS difference. So you just keep throwing gems in there, just futzing about with it until you see what's the most effective modifiers. So you can just, like, for example, if I just say, oh, combustion's doing a lot of damage, what if I change that to something else? What if I changed it to cold to fire, for example? What is the DPS difference on that? And I need to obviously pick the correct one. So it's 25 right now with cold to fire. Take that off, put this back on, it's 30,000. So obviously combustion beats out cold to fire by a substantial amount. And you can also futz around with the quality and stuff. I guess I'll talk about this as well while I'm talking about this. So quality on items, I mentioned this before, increases their base defensive stats. So you can see up there I have evasion rating and energy shield are blue. So quality affects those. I guess I could increase, so yeah, actually I'll just show you with this. So yeah, increasing it, so you can see the armor is 241. If I increase the quality, that number jumps up. And the increase that it gives is percentily based. So the higher the base armor or evasion or energy shield is on the item, the higher it will go if you give it more quality. Quality is also effective on flasks and on your gems. Flask quality on flasks that give life or mana increases the base amount that they recover for. For support-based flasks, like a silver flask or a basalt flask, increases instead the duration of the flask instead. I think by default most flasks have like around either a 4 to a 4.5 duration. So I think that if I increase this to 20%, it would be like a 4.6 duration, and if I increase this, it'd be maybe like 5 or something. Gem quality has different effects depending on the gem itself. So in most cases, you'll just want to just Google the gem and see what its quality increases do. In most cases, if it's a support onto your attacking skill, in all cases, it gives you some kind of benefit that will increase the damage. So increasing the quality is always a good idea for those. For auras just increases the radius of the aura. So unless you're in a party, that doesn't matter. So quality on auras is pretty worthless for the most part. I think that's also the case for curses. I think it mostly just increases the radius or maybe the duration of the curse, which is honestly not that worthwhile for the most part. What else? And then for gems that don't have an attack, have like no damage component, and just have some kind of effect that activates, typically increasing their quality just increases the duration of the buff. And usually it's not a very substantial increase, so that depends on the gem. It differs from gem to gem how much the quality will increase the effectiveness of it. So it's really just something you have to check one by one to see whether it's worth your time to get the quality on it or not. But I would say that for the most part, especially items, you should always have your items qualityed. If they're an item you're expecting to use often, obviously, like when you're just starting out and you're like level 10 or something, you shouldn't be wasting all of your currency upgrading all your items at that point. But if you're around like the mid game, say like level 40 or level 60 or something, then it's probably worthwhile to start using some of this currency. As you can see, I've got like 800 and 500 of these respectively. So I could literally just use it on every item I equip from now on, and it would still be fine. I would still make back all of these just by mapping and just clearing content, so it's fine for me to waste them. But obviously if you don't have a lot of these, you need to be a little bit more discerning on which items you're going to use them on. And the same is also equally true of the items that increase your quality. You want for the flasks and the gems, these are a lot harder to come by, so you want to try and save these for as long as possible. One other additional side benefit of this is that quality items have increased effectiveness the lower the ranking of the item. If the item is rare or unique, you get 1% quality per item used. If they're blue, then you get like 2% per increase, I think. I don't ever use them on blue, so I'm not sure. And lastly, white items get 5% per usage. So sort of a neat trick you can use is if you use the quality on the white item, so this is specifically for flasks I'm talking about, you want to use it on the flask before you start futzing with it, because it only costs 4, and now it's up to its maximum quantity. So now it's up to 6 seconds. And then you want to make it a blue item and start rolling for its various effects. So you see there I just got recharges 3, charges when you take a crit, and then immune to curses. I actually want immune to curses for this character, so this is actually a very, very good roll, very lucky. Normally I'd have to keep rolling that with an Orb of Alteration until I got the appropriate roll on the item that I want. So that's how you typically want to make your flasks. So I think that about covers it. Oh, one last thing is that I said that these helmets gloves, and boots by default can have 4. There are some items that do not have any sockets at all. This is one of them. So the Calm items have no sockets by default. Calm's Roots has the upside of the Calm items is that they have no sockets, but they have huge amounts of life and have some other benefit typically. So Calm's Roots has a max roll of probably 200. Yeah, it's 200 max life is the max roll, and it gives you unwavering stance, and you cannot be knocked back, and your action speed cannot be modified below the base value. So what that means is I can't be knocked around. My action speed can't be reduced, so I can't be slowed, and my attack speed or cast speed can all not be modified. And Unwavering Stance means I can't be stunned, I believe. It's one of the notables in the passive tree. I think it's down here somewhere. Oh, I misspelled stance because I'm really good at this. Yeah, right here. So you can't be stunned, but you also can't evade. This character basically doesn't have any evade, so that doesn't matter literally at all. However, fun fact, so I talked about this in my previous video when I was discussing the stats. So evade and dodge are not the same thing. So as you can see, I've pathed all the way over here to acrobatics. Dodge is not the same as evade. So despite the fact that I have Unwavering Stance from these boots, I can still dodge attacks because it's a different thing. So that's kind of a neat trick that I'm doing on this build. Something to keep in mind, perhaps, and for the future. Other than that, I think that about wraps it up. So just keep in mind that some unique items have a skill embedded into the item itself, in which case you can just socket stuff into the item to get benefit off of it. But for the most part, you're just going to pick an attack skill, throw it into an item, and put as many links into it as you can get as possible. So I think that wraps up this video. Hopefully this will be of help to you as you're moving about and playing this game. And I will see you in the next video.